Okay, recording has started. Recording has started. So for this evening, we will be talking about financial statement analysis for finance companies. We will focus our attention to finance companies. Okay, what are finance companies? What are finance or finance companies? Finance companies is a type of an NBB, N boy boy, okay, NBB, a non-bank banks, non-bank banks. In other words, they are sort of banks, but not really. They are sort of banks, but not really. We call them finance companies. A finance company is a type of a non-bank bank, sort of banks, but not really. Now, if you are going to look at the functions of a bank, if you are going to look at the functions of a bank, of the functions include taking deposits and granting loans. Taking deposits and granting loans. So money comes in from the depositors and money goes out in the form of borrowings by debtors. Taking deposits and granting loans, aside from the task of creating money. Those are the functions of a bank. What makes an entity a non-bank bank? What makes an entity a non-bank bank? If banks do these two functions, if banks do these two functions, an NBB would typically do only one of them. It's either this or this, but not both. For a bank to be considered a bank in a technical sense, it should do these two functions. Failure to do one of the two functions would make it an NBB, a non-bank bank. So what is a finance company? Finance company is one that would only grant loans but not take deposits. Finance company. A finance company would only grant loans. A finance company would be a lender to these debtors, but it cannot take in deposits. Tagalugin ko, yung bangko kumukuha ng deposits at nagpapautang. Yung finance company, hindi kumukuha ng deposit. Nagpapautang lang. Okay? So a finance company is a type of a non-bank bank, NBB, non-bank banks. Sort of a bank, but not really. While banks do the function of taking deposits and granting loans, a finance company will only grant loan and cannot take in deposits. Types of finance companies. How are we going to classify finance companies? We have two ways of classifying finance companies. Okay, there are two ways to classify finance company. The first way of classifying it is according to who the customers are. According to who the customers are. The customers of a finance company may either be number one, consumers, number two, businesses. Types of finance company. The first classification would be according to who the customers are. Sino yung magiging customer? Number one, it could be consumers. And number two, it can be businesses. Consumer ba or business? Yun yung mga customer ng finance company. Let me dig deeper into such. According to who the customers are, the customers of a finance company can be a consumer. So we have consumer finance companies. Examples of consumer finance companies are the auto loans, those who finance a car or a vehicle purchase. Okay, now I want you to go to Google. I want you to go to Google and I want you to search Toyota Finance Company. Okay, Toyota Finance. Ayan. So, pumunta kayo kay Google at search niyo, Toyota Finance Company. You know Toyota to be a car manufacturer, but Toyota also has a subsidiary that is specialized in granting loans to the buyers of Toyota. Toyota Finance. Okay? So that's an example of an auto loan finance company. Financing a car or vehicle purchase. Basta yung consumer, yung customer, yung consumer. No? Customer, yung consumer. So, ano pa yung mga klase ng finance company na yung customer niya consumer, no? Individual consumer. Home mortgages. Home mortgages. The collateral would be a real estate property. So we all know that we can borrow from a bank when we buy a house. Aside from banks, aside from Pag-ibig, we can also approach a home mortgage finance company. A home mortgage finance company would grant loans to consumers who would like to buy real property. May it be a house and lot, condominium units. Okay, that's called a home mortgage. The collateral is a real estate property. The collateral is a real estate property. Consumer finance companies. Okay. So, sinabi nating home mortgage. Example, ito yung bahay na gusto mong bilhin. You would like to purchase this house. Okay? So, part of the house, you may purchase it partly cash and partly borrowing. The borrowing will be collateralized. Tama ba yung word ko? The borrowing, it will be subject to a collateral on the house. So say for example, the value of this house is 12.5 million. Madalas, 80% niyan, pwede mong utangin. Okay? When you want to buy a house worth 12.5 million, 80% of 12.5 million, that's 10 million, you may borrow from the home mortgage finance company, 10 million pesos. We call this a mortgage. Okay? A borrowing secured by the property. Kung hindi mo mababayaran, kukunin nila yung bahay mo. No? Kukunin nila yung bahay mo at ibebenta nila. Yung makukuha nila sa pagbenta ng bahay, gagamitin pambayad ng utang mo. So, at inception, we call this the first mortgage. Now, paano kung tumaas yung halaga ng bahay? Example, from 12.5 million, the value of this house is now 20 million. You can actually borrow a second mortgage. Okay? You may borrow a second mortgage. So from sabihin na natin 12.5 million, tumaas yung halaga, no? Tumaas yung halaga. Sabihin na natin naging 35 million, no? So pwede kang mangutang ng dagdag. We call that a second mortgage. Okay? We call that a second mortgage. So that's home mortgages. Here in the Philippines, we are used to with going to the bank or going to Pag-ibig if you're not qualified in the bank. However, in the West, uso sa kanila yung finance companies who are offering home mortgages in addition to banks. Then the third type of consumer finance company would be consumer durables. Consumer durables. Okay, the consumers would like to purchase appliances and furniture, and yung consumer, wala siyang credit card o hindi siya qualified mangutang sa bangko, pupunta siya sa consumer durable, no? Pupunta siya sa consumer durable. So kung pupunta kayo sa SM, kung pupunta kayo sa SM Appliances, no? Kung pupunta kayo sa Appliances, may tinatawag tayong home credit. Okay? Punta kayo sa cashier nila. Andun yung pwesto ng home credit. Home credit is an example of a consumer durable finance company. If you would like to purchase mga ref, no? Mga ref, mga aircon, no? Ref, aircon, dun sa SM Appliance Center. Andun yung home credit, no? An example of a consumer durable finance company. So, the first way to classify finance companies is according to who the customers are. The customers can be a consumer or a business. So far, we have discussed the types of consumer finance companies. Auto loans, granting consumer the loans so that they may purchase a car or a vehicle, kotse, motor. Home mortgages, granting loans to the consumers who would like to buy their house, lot, condominium. Consumer durables who would grant loans to consumers who would like to purchase an appliance or furniture. Now, what if we go to the next type of finance company? Business finance companies. We are still classifying based on customers. Okay. What if the customers are businesses, business finance companies? We have the floor plan inventory type of finance company. Now, the business, kailangan niya ng inventory. Yung negosyo, kailangan niya ng stocks, no? Kailangan niya ng inventory. A floor plan inventory finances the inventory for a business with the floor of inventory as the collateral. Example, you are buying and selling cars, no? Buying and selling ka second-hand cars. So, let's say this is your floor plan, no? Ito yung floor kung saan mo nilalagay mga kotse mo. Ang problema, kung bibili ka ng kotse, mauubusan ka ng pondo. Kanino ka lalapit? Lalapit ka sa business finance company na nagbibigay ng floor plan inventory. Ang gagawin mong collateral, yung floor na ito, kasama yung mga kotse. So, finance company, pautang naman. Bibili ako ng mga second-hand car, tapos ibebenta ko, buy and sell. So, we call this a floor plan inventory. It finances the inventory for a business with the floor of the inventory as the collateral. Okay? So, who is the customer this time? The customer is a business, not a consumer anymore. What else? Business finance companies, rather than lending so that the business may buy a truck, kunyari yung negosyo, kailangan ng delivery, so bibili sana siya ng truck. Pwede naman wag na lang pautangin para bumili ng truck. Pahiramin na lang yung truck. Leasing services is also one of the service for a business finance company. In a leasing services, the finance company would own a truck, papahiramin niya for a fee, no? Ipaparent niya yung truck sa negosyo. Okay? So rather than financing the purchase of the truck, the business finance company will own the truck itself, papahiramin niya na lang at maniningil siya, no? Ipapa-rent out niya na lang yung truck. We call that leasing. Then another one, we also have accounts receivable financing. Kunyari, may negosyo ka. Yung mga customer mo hindi pa nagbabayad. So rather than having cash, you have accounts receivable. Okay? Your customers are not paying you on time, no? They're not paying you immediately. So if you're granting your customers N60, you're giving your customers 60 days to pay. That's called accounts receivable, right? Kaso kailangan mo na yung pondo. What you can do is to pledge. Use the AR as the collateral. No? Hiram ka muna sa finance company, gamitin mo yung AR as a collateral. Or, you may outright sell the AR. Yung karapatan mong maningil ng customer, ibebenta mo sa finance company. Okay? So, this is for business finance companies. In a business finance company, how do they fund the customer? What kind of customer are they funding? They are funding businesses. Okay? A floor plan inventory would use the floor of inventory as the collateral. Leasing is an alternative to lending. Rather than lending money, you are lending an item like a truck. Accounts receivable financing can mean you use the AR as a collateral or an outright sale of the collateral to the finance company. Okay? So ulitin ko ha, from the start. How do we classify the types of finance companies? We may do it according to who the customers are. If the customer is a consumer, the finance company may provide the following services. Auto loans to finance a car or vehicle purchase. Home mortgage to finance a house or a condominium purchase. Consumer durables to finance an appliance or furniture purchase. The consumer is the customer here. If we're talking about a business finance company, the customer would be a business. Business would need to borrow in order to have inventory. So we have a floor plan inventory, financing an inventory for a business with the floor of inventory as the collateral. Leasing, rather than lending money, we're lending an item like a truck, lending machinery like a truck. Accounts receivable financing. This can come in the form of pledging, where the business would use the receivable as a collateral. Kung hindi makabayad yung business, kukunin sa i-collect na AR, or an outright sale of the AR, which we call factoring. Yung karapatang maningil sa customer, ibenta sa finance company. Now, another way to classify finance companies is according to who the owners are. By the way, before that, do we have any questions? Before I continue, do we have any questions? Okay, so I think everything is clear as there are no questions. So the next way of classifying a finance company is according to who the owners are. So we have the following classifications according to ownership. Number one, captive sales finance company. If we classify Toyota Finance is an example of a captive sales finance companies. It is owned by the auto dealer company. Okay? It is owned by an auto dealer company. We call it captive sales finance company. Bibili ka ng Toyota, yung agent naman ng Toyota Finance, siya naman yung lalapit sa'yo. Ay, bibili ka pala ng Toyota. Dito ka na mag-loan sa Toyota Finance, no? So kumita na sila sa kotse, kikita pa sila sa interest, no? So Toyota Finance is an example of a captive sales finance company, no? When you buy Toyota, you have the option of borrowing from Toyota. Now, another type is called a sales finance company. Walang captive, sales lang. It will cater not only one auto dealer. So a sales finance company would be an independent from Toyota. So kung bibili ka man ng Honda, bibili ka man ng Mitsubishi, bibili ka man ng Ford, bibili ka ng Chevy, kahit anong bilhin mo, pumapayag sila, no? Not exclusively to Toyota. A sales finance company is like a captive sales company, but it's not owned by an auto dealer. It would cater not only one auto dealer, but many types. Okay, nakuha nyo yung difference. Captive sales finance company katulad ni Toyota Finance, kung saan ang mangyayari dyan ay bibili ka ng Toyota, pwede lang sila magpautang kung bibili ka lang ng Toyota. No? Sales finance companies, it's not close to one company. It may cater to other auto dealers. Then you have the next one, a bank subsidiary. A bank subsidiary is a finance company owned by the bank. Okay? A bank subsidiary is a finance company owned by the bank. Sinong nagmamay-ari sa bank subsidiary? Yung bangko mismo. Okay? Yung bangko mismo, yung may-ari ng bank subsidiary. Okay ba tayo doon? Sir, ang weirdo naman ng bangko. Yung bangko, pwede naman siya magpautang. Ba't kailangan bumili pa siya or magmay-ari pa siya ng finance company? Bakit hindi yung bangko, yung customers ng finance company, tumiretso na lang sa bangko? Ito kasi yung problema. Pagdating sa regulation, mas mahigpit sa bangko. May mga borrower na hindi papasa sa bangko, pero papasa sa finance company. Ulitin ko ha. You might be wondering, mapapaisip kayo, bakit naman yung bangko magmamay-ari pa ng finance company? Yung finance company nagpapautang lang yan. Yung bangko pwede naman magpautang. Pwede mag-deposit, pwedeng magpautang. The problem is, banks are very much regulated. There are customers who may not be qualified to borrow from a bank. Okay? Reject agad pagdating sa bangko. However, they may pass if they go to the finance company. Example, yung home credit na yan. Yung customers ng home credit, yan yung mga taong hindi qualified magkaroon ng credit card. Okay? People who are not qualified to have credit cards, they go to home credit. Home credit would cater them. No? Home credit is an example of a consumer durable finance company. No? Yung pupunta kayo ng SM. Okay? Or any appliance store. Andyan yung home credit. Okay. So a bank subsidiary, this is a finance company owned by a bank. Okay? Banks cannot cater risky customers, no? Risky borrowers. So what a bank can do is to own a finance company so that it may cater those risky customers through the finance company. Okay? Bank subsidiary. Next, independent finance companies. These are finance companies that are not owned by any interested party. Hindi sila pagmamay-ari ng auto dealer, ng bangko, o kung kanino man. We just call them independent finance companies. So according to who the owners of the finance companies are, we may classify them into 4. Captive sales finance companies, generally owned by auto dealers like Toyota Finance. Sales finance companies, they are owned by an auto dealer. However, they do not cater only to one type of an auto dealer. Bank subsidiary owned by a bank. Then independent finance companies are owned by someone not interested. Not among the three, no? Not among the three. Okay? So let's talk about financing the finance company. Okay, let me ask you this question. How do you finance a bank? Saan nanggaling yung pondo para sa operations ng bangko? Let me repeat. How do you finance a bank? Majority of the funding of the bank, saan nanggaling? Baka mamaya nakalimutan nyo na, ha? So let's go back to banking, no? Let's go back to commercial banks. Where does a bank get most of its funding? Saan nanggagaling yung pondo ng bank? Okay, very good. Deposits, no? Mr. Shi, Miss Lipagan, thank you for answering. Now, for banks, most of the financing comes from deposits, no? Kung naalala nyo yung percentage ng pondo nanggagaling sa deposits. Now, finance companies are like banks. However, they do not have the power to receive deposits. Ulitin ko, yung finance company, bawal tumanggap ng deposits. So, saan manggagaling yung financing ng finance company? Where do we get the financing for the finance company? So, just like any company, it can come from liabilities and equity. But let us be specific. What are the sources of financing for a finance company? To give you a clue, wala ang deposits doon. Bawal tumanggap ng deposits yung finance company. Bawal tumanggap ng deposits yung finance company. So, the sources of funding for a finance company include liabilities and equity. And alam nyo, napakaliit ng equity ng mga financial institutions, no? So, yung liabilities, pwede makukuha siya ng short-term loans from a bank. Ito yung finance company, mangungutang sa bangko, short-term loans. Pwede rin long-term loans. Finance companies can borrow short-term loans and long-term loans. It cannot take in deposits. Okay? Finance companies' liabilities include short-term loans and long-term loans. Finance companies can also issue commercial papers. Okay? Commercial paper. What is a commercial paper? What is a commercial paper? A commercial paper, what is a commercial paper? So a commercial paper is a highly liquid security issued only by large and stable companies, including finance company. So commercial papers can be issued only by large and stable companies with a maximum maturity of 270 days. Now, the general public can lend to the company via commercial paper. However, not all companies can issue a commercial paper. Sinong pwedeng mangutang via commercial paper? Only large and stable companies. Okay? A commercial paper is a highly liquid instrument. Madali ito magbentahan. The borrower of a commercial paper can only be large and stable companies. Okay? Sinong pwedeng mangutang? Only large and stable companies. Who can be the lender? Sinong pwedeng magpautang? Everyone can lend. Okay? Everyone can lend. So, that's a commercial paper. Of course, meron tayong bonds payable. A finance company can finance its assets with bonds payable as well. The equity of a finance company, just like any financial institution, is very small. Napakaliit ng equity niya. For captive sales finance company, sino nagmamay-ari sa kanya? Yung auto dealer. For a bank subsidiary, sino nagmamay-ari sa kanya? Yung bangko mismo. Okay? Controversies of finance companies. Controversies of finance companies are usually present in the secondary market. Okay? Ito yung mga loans na in-issue na, tapos binenta pa. No? Issued debt is being sold. So, kunyari, meron tong mga loans, no? Meron tong mga loans receivable. Bumili tayo ng kotse. Nangutang tayo sa finance company. The finance company can sell our loans receivable, no? Yung loans payable natin sa finance company, loans receivable sa kanila, pwede niyang i-package yan at ibenta sa iba. We call that process securitization. No? Securitization. Okay? The secondary market is a market where debt is already issued. Okay? Meron ng borrower, no? Meron ng borrower. Tapos, yung lender, binenta sa ibang investor. Nalala nyo yung secondary market, no? Where the debt which is already issued is being sold. 2008 is the most popular year for the discussion of controversies on finance companies because subprime mortgages were sold. Subprime meaning hindi maganda yung quality. Ibig sabihin nun, subprime, yung borrower, hindi maganda yung track record. Adjustable rate mortgage, yung interest rate na adjust. In 2008, na bankruptcy Lehman Brothers. Okay, I hope you were able to hear this news. Lehman Brothers, which caused a recession, no? Which caused a recession in that year, which has reached the Philippines. Hindi natin masyadong nadama dahil wala pa tayong masyadong investments during that time. BNC and ALS, these are subsidiaries of the Lehman Brothers. Okay? So, more on the controversies later, after the lecture. I'm going to talk about more of this later. Okay? So, let's talk about the regulation of finance companies. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas in our country classify finance companies as an NBFI. The technical term that DSP uses for finance companies, the legal term rather, the legal term for finance companies is non-bank FIs, financial institutions. Non-bank financial institutions, NBFIs, which includes investment houses. Diniscuss naman natin yung investment bank. Okay? And FCs, the finance companies. So, ano yung framework ni BSP sa regulation ng finance company? Andun siya under sa NBFI. Kasama niya yung investment banks or investment houses, tsaka yung finance companies. Okay? Hindi ako pupunta sa detalye nito. This is less strict than the bank. The minimum CAR is 10%. The minimum capital adequacy ratio for a finance company is 10%. Okay? Yun yung minimum capital adequacy ratio. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay. So, wala kayong question? So, kung wala kayong question, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to watch this video. May papanood lang ako sa inyong video for 10 minutes and then we will resume. Okay? I have posted the link in the chat box. I have posted the link in the chat box. I'll give you 10 minutes to watch it. I'll give you 10 minutes to watch it. And then we will resume. Sorry, 6 minutes lang. I will give you 6 minutes to watch the video and then we shall resume.